Out of all the houses, and this is something I want OC and Kenneth, because obviously when you're recruited as an athlete, all different coaches come in, your family.
Right.
One thing, and anyone that ever played with you, Coach Mack, and Kenneth, we've talked about off air before, you've heard the stories. There's something about, and I'm just going to give you this, I'm just going to say this in your behalf, because I know you wouldn't say this about yourself, but there's something about you when you walked into a family, when you got on the phone with a mother and you told them, hey, I'm going to take care of your kid, he's going to graduate, and I'm going to get him right. There's something that was like a dead silence. So many people have told me stories like when Coach Matt came to my house and said to my parents looked at him and they said, okay, where do we sign? So what about that relationship that you built with players' families transcended into how players played for you on the field?
Well, I always had one philosophy. The more you give to them, the more they're going to give back to you, And so sometimes I've been accused of being too soft, because we would kind of divide players up by, the guys who what we call the green guys, they could take care of themselves. And then we had that middle group that was kind of a pink group, that could go either way. Then we had the red group, which is the ones, and people are, how come you spend all your time with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so? I says, because they need me,
Yeah.
I mean, because I was on those guys every day, and I knew where they were every day, what they were doing every day, and the idea was to take the guys who were the red guys and move them to the middle, and then hopefully by the time they got to be seniors, they were in that green group. Well, I didn't have to worry about them, and that was kind of what you wanted to do. You wanted to move those guys and get them to be responsible, get them to do the things. And so a lot of times guys say, we need to get rid of that guy. And so sometimes I would hang on to guys too long, and just keep fighting them. They would fight me, I would fight them, and I'd always say, well, I'm going to win the battle, dude, sooner or later. And, and I was never 100%, but if a kid played for me, a young man played for me, I was responsible for him, responsible for his graduation, responsible for what he did on and off the field. I mean, so as a head coach, you're really responsible for everything because it all comes back to you. You're responsible for their graduation. You're responsible for how they play. You're responsible for what they do future-wise. You're responsible for developing them as a human being.
I played with a couple guys up at Weber State for Coach Mack, right? And we were like a band of misfit toys, and I'm sure.
I said at Utah, we're the Bad News Bears.
I like that, misfit toys.
Yeah, we were the island of misfit toys up there in a lot of ways, right? There was a bunch of guys that didn't fit anywhere else.
Maybe had trouble somewhere.
Maybe had trouble somewhere else. Guys that wish they were at Utah or BYU and had a home at Weber State and had a chip on their shoulder because of it. And guys who, a lot of those guys were really good players, and they just couldn't necessarily pull it all together. And I'm not going to name names because I don't know who's comfortable with all that being out and who's not. But there were guys on that team that year that Coach Mack says that there was that red group that needed me. Like, I've stayed in touch with guys from my teams, all my teams, right?
Yeah.
And there are guys that, truly did need Coach Mack just to function as, regular human beings and to have that guy.
And
guys,
he's the only one that could have said this,
I've got one guy particularly in mind, unbelievable football player, super charismatic individual, absolutely. Everyone always wanted to be around this cat, right? But if he didn't have the structure of the football program, and if he didn't have Coach Mack and his assistants lighting a fire under his you-know-what, he was not going to end up being a great player and a team captain and much of anything. And you saw, when he would fall out of, kind of out of orbit, they'd bring him back in. When he'd fall out of orbit again, they'd bring him back in. And, the results came on the football field, and it was fantastic to watch. But you saw the need for it when 5 years later, right, we're all so far removed and people move out of state and go different places. And this dude is kind of in the wind wondering, what am I going to do with my life now? Because he needed that.
Yeah.
And how many other coaches have there been that, let those guys and the guys like me and the guys like whoever just end up in the wind even when they're still college athletes and never finish their education. And like this dude finished his education because of Coach Mack.